Welcome back to Murderlicious. I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Lauren.
And today we're going to talk about the mysterious disappearance of Lauren Spierer. Now, since her name is Lauren and your name, Lauren, is also Lauren, maybe we should call you something different this episode so that it's not too confusing. Lo, I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Lo.
And today we're going to talk about the mysterious disappearance of Lauren Spierer. Lauren was a 20-year-old sophomore at Indiana University in Bloomington when she went missing in 2011. Lauren was from upstate New York originally. She's a native of the Scarsdale area. And we're not sure exactly why she chose Indiana University, but we know that her parents thought it was perfect for her. And I guess a lot of people that she knew were going to be going to that school because she went to a Jewish summer camp in Pennsylvania, and a lot of her friends that she met there also were going to Indiana University. So she ended up choosing that school to go to for college. And it was a popular college for people from the East Coast to attend. While she was at Indiana University, Lauren was involved a lot in the Jewish community there, specifically in the Hillel, which is like a Jewish organization on campus. At IU, Lauren was studying textile merchandising, and she wanted to go into fashion ultimately, although textile merchandising is really a major that's more for like the manufacturing side of it. But regardless, that's what her major was, and that's what she was pursuing. Lauren's dad, Robert Spierer, and her mom, Charlene Spierer, and her older sister, Rebecca Spierer, were in her immediate family. So it was her mom, her dad, and her older sister. And I just want to point out that her older sister and her look like they could be twins. So Lauren had a boyfriend who also went to IU with her. He was a senior and she was a sophomore, so he's a little bit older than her. And his name was Jesse Wolf. And they had been dating for 3 years, and they had met at that camp that we talked about in Pennsylvania. So they had known each other for a long time, and they had been dating for 3 years when she went missing. Lauren was gorgeous. She was 4'11", tiny little thing. She was like 90 pounds. She had long blonde hair and bright blue eyes. Lauren lived on campus in apartments called Smallwood Plaza, and she had 2 roommates, Hadar Tamir and Alex Steinberg. So she lived with 2 other girls in these really nice apartments called Smallwood Plaza. On June 3rd, 2011, Lauren went out to party with some friends. First, she pre-gamed and she went to a popular campus bar, and then later, around 4:30 a.m., she disappeared and was never seen again. So, Lo, why don't you walk us through the timeline of the events that we know for sure happened that night, and then we'll talk about theories later.
So Lauren left her apartment at Smallwood Plaza around 12:30 in the morning, so she already had a late start to her night. But also for college students, that's not that rare.
No, not at all. In fact, we would always go out at midnight.
And she was meeting up with friends to pregame before going to the campus bar. She was caught on surveillance cameras leaving the apartment with her friend David Rohn, and she knows David through the Smallwood apartments. She was seen on footage wearing a white blouse, but it kind of looks more like a t-shirt in the pictures, and she had on black leggings.
And in this surveillance footage, I do notice that she's carrying a jacket slung over her arm.
So Lauren and David met up with their friends at Jason Rosenbaum's townhouse to pregame, and he will be referred to as Jay because he goes by Jay.
Which is weird. I've never heard a Jason go by Jay. Well, I guess I do. I guess it is not weird.
So Jay lived at the 5 North townhomes, which wasn't far from her apartment. It was about a few blocks. And Lauren met up with Corey Rossman and Mike Beth at Jay's apartment.
I love all these Jewish names.
Yeah, they were all Jewish.
It's okay. We can say that because we're Jewish too.
So Mike and Corey were roommates, and they lived a few doors down from Jay. And this was Lauren's first time meeting Corey and Mike, but I also have read some reports that say that she met Corey a few days earlier. Some say that she met him a few weeks earlier. Anyway, it was a short amount of time before she becomes really comfortable with Corey. And Corey supposedly told friends that he was romantically interested in Lauren prior to her disappearance, but this isn't confirmed. And Lauren and Corey leave Jay's apartment at 1:30 and walk to Kilroy's bar. So they left alone while Mike left to go back to his apartment to study. David went home, and I'm not really sure about Jay, but I think he did stay at his apartment.
Well, it's also important to point out that this was the night of one of the NBA semifinal games or something like that. So there was a big basketball game happening. So a lot of people were gathering to watch this game. And I think that might have also been why they didn't go out until so much later, because this big game was on. And maybe they were like waiting for the game to end and then going out to the bar. And I think that's also why her boyfriend wasn't there, but we'll get into that later.
Lauren and Corey had just become friends, and they were leaving to go party together, and Lauren's boyfriend wasn't there with them that night. So around 1:30, they walked to Kilroy's bar, and it's an only 18 and over nightclub in Bloomington, and they were only allowed to serve alcohol to people who were 21 and up, obviously. And remember, Lauren was only 20, but she probably had a fake ID like most college kids do.
She definitely did.
And the bar was also known to get sloppier with checking IDs the later that it was. And at this point, by the time they got there, it was around 1:45 a.m.
Now, Kilroy's Sports Bar, it kind of sounds like a dive bar by the name of it, but then you heard Lo just say that it was like a nightclub. This place is like a huge, amazing adult fun house, basically. There's like a sand pit in the back where people can go outside. And this was in the summer. Remember, it was June. So it was really a fun place to go where you could hang out, and it was a very popular place.
So Corey and Lauren arrived at 1:46 a.m. and they stayed for about 45 minutes. They left at 2:27. So Lauren took her shoes off and she lost her phone. But remember, the patio at the bar was covered in sand, which probably explains why she took her shoes off. And they walked back to her Smallwood apartment. So they got back to Smallwood at 2:30. So they left at 2:27 and they're already back at 2:30. And we know this because they're caught on security footage walking into the apartment. And we see on the footage, well, I guess we don't see it.
I didn't see it.
I didn't see it either because the police haven't released it. But there is footage, apparently, of an altercation on the 5th floor, which is her floor. And the altercation was between Corey, the guy she was with, and another guy named Zach Oakes.
He was like friends with her boyfriend, right?
Yeah, so Zach is one of Jesse's friends, maybe. I've read some places saying that it's one of Jesse's friends and Jesse's her boyfriend. But I've also read that it's not. They're not friends. But Zach claims that this altercation occurred when he was voicing his concern over whether Corey was treating Lauren right. He asked Lauren if she was okay, and Corey apparently said, "She's okay, I got it." And then Zach told Corey that he should take Lauren home, and Corey cursed at Zach, and Zach punched him.
Well, I don't know if I believe this, because why would he be like, "You should take her home," when they're standing literally in front of her house? Like, what?
Yeah. But Corey states that this punch caused him to not remember anything after Kilroy's.
Yes, it's reported by multiple witnesses that both Corey and Lauren were super, super fucked up, intoxicated.
So for some reason, Corey and Lauren decide to go back to his place instead of hers. Because she also lost her keys. So Lauren is walking around with no keys, no wallet, because I think her keys were attached to her wallet on a keychain, and she lost her wallet, she lost her phone. She's still shoeless. And between 2:48 and 2:51, cameras see Lauren and Corey walking down an alley towards his place. Apparently during this walk, Lauren fell twice on her head, and eventually Corey carried her back. Her keys and her wallet were found later in this alley. At 3:38 a.m., according to a bar manager, there was a mystery man who threw an intoxicated woman matching Lauren's description over his shoulder. There's no video evidence to prove this.
Okay, but this witness is a manager of a bar called Yogi's. Keep that in mind because that will come into play later, because this witness ends up knowing one of the people of interest or suspects in this case.
So they get back to Corey's, where he lived with that guy Mike that we talked about earlier, who was at Jay's with them. And Corey puked while going up the stairs to his room. Mike said that Lauren was conscious, but obviously super drunk. And Mike said that he put Corey to bed and then went back to Lauren.
Yeah, I've also read reports that he said that he like cleaned up the puke and like put him to bed, and I don't believe that for a second. Like, I don't know any guy that would like clean up another guy's puke. Yeah.
So Mike decided, supposedly, that he didn't know Lauren well enough to watch her, and she wanted to leave because she wanted to party more, so he took her back to Jay's apartment since Jay was their mutual friend and he lived right down the hall. And also he's known Lauren since high school, so he thought maybe he would be like a better person to watch her since Mike didn't know her at all. So Mike and Jay tried to put Lauren to bed, but she was so drunk that apparently she didn't want to stop partying. So she asked Mike to come back to her place for more drinks, and he kind of refused and said, "No, I think you should just go to bed." So at 4:15 a.m., David, the guy that she was with earlier, that lives in her apartment with her, and they went to
David
Jay's.
Roan.
Yeah, David Roan. He gets a call, but he doesn't answer. And the Journal News of New York later reports an unconfirmed account from Lauren's roommate Hadar, who claims that Jay told her that Lauren used Jay's phone to call David because she couldn't find hers. So David confirms that he got a call, but he won't confirm who it was from, and there's not much more information out there about the calls. So 15 minutes later at 4:30, Jay says that he watched Lauren walk down the block still barefoot because he told her, "If you can walk to the end of the block, then you're good enough to walk home." So Lauren was seen walking in the direction of her apartment. She was walking south on College Avenue from 11th Street, and her apartment was on College Avenue at 8th Street. So it was only 3 blocks.
Jay said that he watched Lauren walking from his own balcony. So his apartment was like on a higher floor, and it had this like little like Romeo Juliet type little balcony thing that covered one of his windows, and he watched her from there walking.
So at this point, when she was walking home, she still had no phone, no keys, no wallet, no ID, no shoes. And this was the last time that she was ever seen. And the last person known to ever see her was Jay, if we're believing this version of events. Lauren's apartment's video footage shows that she never made it home.
At this point, we want to point out that there is surveillance video of Lauren and Corey. There is surveillance footage of Lauren herself. There are surveillance cameras in multiple locations along these paths that they traveled. However, the police have not released any of this footage to the media, to the public, or even to Lauren's family. They've only released one still image of the CCTV footage from Lauren's apartment complex, and that was only obtained after like a huge battle of trying to get it from the apartment building. But anyway, they've only released that one photo. So the videos that Lauren Lowe was just talking about, we've not seen ourselves. Some more information to share is that it later surfaced that other people were staying with Jay at this time period. An internet sleuth claimed to see a tweet that showed that Jay might be having unidentified visitors from Michigan that morning. So it's rumored that he had friends in town from the University of Michigan staying with him to party. But that tweet does not exist anymore. We can't find it. It's no longer public. Maybe it was deleted. We don't know. Jay's attorney confirmed that there were other people around, and his attorney believes that the police have all of their names and information. Some of these people have been named in the civil lawsuit that the Spierer family filed against Jay and his friends, which we'll get into later. At 4:35 a.m., a homeless man reportedly heard a woman screaming just west of where Lauren was last seen. It's unclear whether the police ever ran down this tip, and the speculation is that the man's identity was a man who was like well known in the area, called Road Dog Crawford, like Franklin Road Dog Crawford. He was like a well-known homeless guy that like frequented the streets, and all the students knew him and would give him money and beer and stuff and hang out. But anyway, Franklin Road Dog Crawford reportedly called in this tip about hearing a woman scream, and coincidentally, a few days later, he was found dead in a dumpster. Another thing to mention is that the early afternoon of June 3rd, and remember, Lauren went missing in the early hours of June 3rd, so just later that afternoon, after she went missing, Jesse texted her, and an employee at Kilroy's bar answered the text and said, "Hey, this, some girl left her phone here. If you're trying to get a hold of her, she left her phone here at the bar." So Jesse called Lauren's roommate, Hadar, and said, "Hey, have you seen Lauren? She left her phone at the bar." And she was like, "No, we haven't seen her." And eventually they reported her missing to the Bloomington Police Department. At some point, somebody called Lauren's sister, Rebecca. Jesse did, right. And so later that afternoon, Lauren's dad got a call from his other daughter, Rebecca, who's, Lauren's sister. And she said, "Lauren's missing. Like, we got to go find her." So Robert called Jesse, who was at the police station, And Robert and his wife, Charlene, so Lauren's mom and dad, immediately began calling hospitals in the area to see if anyone matching her description had been admitted there. They were doing what they could, and they finally just arrived the next day in Bloomington. And they stayed until August. So they stayed from June 4th until August to try to find her. So one other thing to mention that's pretty important is that Lauren had a heart condition called long QT syndrome, and she needed daily medication to control it. It's like an irregular heartbeat or something. And apparently at any random point of time, like even just walking down the street, she could have some kind of like heart skip a beat type of situation and just die suddenly or something like that. So they were like really trying to find her quickly, and they got the police involved right away, and there was like a massive search launched immediately. Also, she's like a pretty white girl, so that helped too, get the word out fast. We all know how that goes, unfortunately. But it was fortunate for this situation because it got the word out right away, and everybody started looking as soon as possible. So on June 8th, the Bloomington police act on an anonymous, very specific tip and send a dive team to search Lake Monroe. This is south of Bloomington near Four Winds Resort and Marina, but nothing was found. On June 9th, the police confirmed they had persons of interest, but they won't reveal who. On June 15th, the police released a grainy surveillance image of a white pickup truck that appeared to pass twice through the area of where Lauren was last seen. And we're going to post a picture of this truck on our Instagram, Murderlicious Podcast. And you guys have to look in the back and tell us what you think that you see, because I see like a blonde girl sitting in the back of the truck bed. It looks to me like she is sitting down facing the camera and with her eyes open and holding on with her hands to like a railing. That's what it looks like to me. I mean, like, but if we are seeing what we think we're seeing, this looks like someone willingly sitting in the back of a truck, not like someone kidnapped.
Yeah, like maybe
Unless
someone came up to her and was like, hey,
do you
want
want to ride?
Yeah.
Yeah, or she's like, man, I don't have my shoes or my phone, and they're like, hey, you want me to take you to the bar to go get it? I don't know. You guys look at the image and you comment on our Instagram and tell us what you think you see. So anyway, they released the footage of that truck, and police said that they cleared the driver a few days later, and apparently his girlfriend called in a tip implicating him, saying that he had a white truck and was in the area, and she was mad at him because he used to abuse her or something. But I don't know. They say that they cleared him, but I don't know if I believe that they really did, because there's also rumors that the police executed a search warrant on a property and that a white truck was towed from there. And I don't know if this is the same person or not, but you guys will have to go on Web Sleuths. There's 35 different 45-page. So if that makes sense, there's 35 45-page threads.
So just to clear this picture up, the police did clear that driver a few days later. He was on probation. He apparently told his girlfriend that he used to abuse, that what happened to Lauren will happen to her. So she called the cops to take a look into him, and he was cleared. But investigators do think that although he was cleared, the random abduction theory is still valid because she was a small drunk girl alone at 4 a.m.
Yeah, and there were also a lot of perverts in the area of the campus lurking and prowling and operating at this time period. But we'll get into that later. So on August 16th, which is 2 months after she went missing, the police and the FBI searched the Sycamore Ridge landfill, and that is where Bloomington's trash is delivered. And they sifted through over 4,100 tons of garbage over a 9-day period. But they didn't find anything that they have told us about. And then on November 1st, which was 5 months later after she disappeared, Jay provided a full statement allowing the search of his home. He gave DNA and he took a polygraph. And Lauren's dad says that one of the boys refuses to speak to them or to their private investigators, and that's Corey Rossman. And Corey says that it's inappropriate the way that Lauren's parents are harassing people that are also victims in this case. He says, we've done nothing wrong. If we done something wrong, we would have been arrested already. All Lauren's parents are doing is hurting my career. He also said that he never said if he did or did not lose his memory, that his lawyer said that, not him. So we've got finger pointing happening, immediately within the first months of her going missing. So, which makes sense that they would look at who she was last with. But there's also a bigger reason too, which I don't know why, Lauren. You haven't mentioned it yet, but the drugs, Lo.
Jay told investigators that either Lauren or David told him that they crushed up and snorted Klonopin beforehand, and he thinks that they also took coke.
Beforehand what?
Before they got to Jay's apartment to pregame.
This group of friends was how do I say it? This group of friends were very big drug users.
Yeah, I also have read that the party scene at IU has a lot of drugs involved.
Yes.
So it's not like they were the only ones doing drugs.
No, and these are like a bunch of rich Jewish kids, like with their daddy's credit cards. So what else are they going to do? Of course they're doing drugs. And it's also typical among most every college kid ever out there. So we're not judging anybody at all.
So as the investigation got deeper, Lauren's parents learned about her, quote, wild side, which wasn't really wild, but they searched her apartment and they found cocaine. But investigators say that they have no information that she actually consumed cocaine that night because they don't have her body. Lauren has also been picked up on public intoxication charges in the past, and Jesse's mom, her boyfriend's mom, said that Lauren was thrown out of summer camp for drugs.
Which is so disgusting to me that she would even be saying that about somebody that's missing, about your son's girlfriend who's missing. Like, does she not for 1 second put herself in Lauren's mom's shoes? Like, how would she feel if it was her son that was missing and it was some other mother that was like bad-mouthing her? I think that's really terrible that she would even say that. But yes, we don't know if that's true that she was thrown out of camp, but even if it was true, who cares? That doesn't mean that she deserved to be missing.
So as we get into the suspects or persons of interest, we'll talk about Jesse first and go a little deeper into the things that him and his mom have said. Jesse claims that the night that Lauren disappeared, he wasn't with her at all because he was watching that game that we talked about. Jesse says that he was texting back and forth with Lauren all night and that she told him that she was going to walk home and go to bed, and apparently he replied, "If you wake up, call me and we'll talk." I don't know what they were going to talk about. I don't know if that's like just call me and we'll talk in the morning, or if it's something deeper. But she didn't go to sleep that night. She went with David to pregame at Jay's. So Jesse's parents gave numerous statements saying that he completed a polygraph but would not comply with Bloomington police to take one, and that he passed it privately, given 2 weeks after her disappearance, administered by a retired FBI polygrapher. And his mom said that we did it because we wanted to be 100% sure. We thought that he was innocent, but you can never be 100% sure. The polygraph confirmed his innocence. Jesse was not with Lauren that night. It's also important to note, we didn't mention this, but right after her disappearance, every single guy that she was with that night lawyered up immediately.
So we have this adorable, fun girl. She does some drugs. She goes to the bar. She goes to her friends' houses to party. She's out partying, and she disappears. And the first person that they look at are the people that she was last seen with and her boyfriend, right? That's where we're at?
Yes.
Okay. And she disappeared while doing like the walk of shame type of a situation. But it wasn't really a walk of shame because there was no reports of her like hooking up with a boy. But I mean, this sounds like total normal, typical college behavior to me. Have you ever done the walk of shame?
Who hasn't?
Well, I certainly have. I broke my foot doing it. But yeah, I was walking home from a guy's apartment like 2 blocks away from my own apartment at 6 o'clock in the morning because his parents were coming up because there was a football game. And he like woke me up and he's like, my parents are going to be here. You got to go. And he was a dick and didn't want to drive me home, which it was 2 blocks. So I don't blame him. But so I like rushed to put my shoes on. I had like high heel boots and I didn't zip them up all the way. And while I was walking, I like my ankle like turned the side and completely like snapped, and I broke it. And I had to literally crawl down the street at 6 a.m. back to my own apartment because my own cell phone was dead. Because the guy I was hooking up with did not have a Nextel charger. I mean, Lauren Spierer is definitely not the first person to be walking, late at night or early in the morning home.
Alone.
Exactly. And when you're on a college campus, you totally think that you're safe. You have a false sense of security or an actual sense of security because it's supposed to be a safe area. This was a very nice neighborhood. And not only that, when you're 20, you feel invincible. Even if you have a heart condition, you don't think about anything happening to you. When you hear bad stuff happening to other people, you're like, well, that's never going to happen to me. Anyway, so where were we in the timeline?
Jesse's mom is where we're at. And Jesse's mom says that the reason that she didn't let Jesse comply with the Bloomington police is because she says that the department is not competent. And she said, quote, "I don't think they're very adept at anything except giving kids drinking tickets. I don't trust them, period." End
oh my
quote.
God.
And his mom also says that Jesse is devastated. He lost the love of his life. But she said, quote, "If Jesse was guilty of anything, he was guilty of taking care of Lauren, who had some serious drug issues. She would abuse to the point where she would black out. Jesse always threatened to call and tell her parents, and she said, 'If you do, I'll break up with you.' My son took care of her for 2 years while she was in college. The one night she went out without him and did what she did unfortunately cost her her life."
That is just so terrible for her to say that, not only about Lauren, but about her parents and also the police. Like, what? Like, why is she so defensive over her son?
Yeah, she said, "This poor little girl is not with us today because of her drug abuse."
Well, how would she even know that?
And Lauren's parents are, like, horrified by this. They said, "We are appalled that the wolves have defamed our daughter, knowing that Lauren will never have the opportunity to respond."
Yeah, that's just shitty.
So, looking in to the next persons of interest, Jay Rosenbaum, the last person to see Lauren, or so he says, he took a privately administered polygraph that he passed, but he refuses to speak directly to Lauren's parents. Corey, the guy that she spent most of the night with, he got an attorney, and the attorney issued a statement that Corey had no memory of the night after the bar because of that punch. And in an interview 2 years later, he said that Lauren's parents were harassing him and other victims of the evening. They're not victims. Lauren is the victim, not them. He claims that he and the other friends were victims due to the trial in the media, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and he states that he has cooperated to the best of his ability. Mike Beth, the one who was roommates with Corey and brought her to Jay's, he got a lawyer shortly after the search began.
And people think that this is really suspicious that all these boys got lawyers right away, and they kind of think that there's some like massive cover-up conspiracy that maybe like Lauren overdosed in their apartment, or they like hid her body or dumped her somewhere.
That kind of leads us into the first theory. So she overdosed. Witnesses have said that she was doing drugs that night, and pairing this with her heart condition could have caused an overdose.
Yeah, or maybe she died when she hit her head. Like maybe she had like a internal bleeding or something like that. But I still don't think that the kids would panic. Why would they? How could they live with themselves? It's like the Jewish guilt. Like you cannot go to temple once a year and repent on Yom Kippur for this huge secret of hiding somebody's daughter forever. Like there's no way. And if she really did overdose, they wouldn't be guilty of anything. Like they wouldn't have been charged with anything. What? Because they had drugs? They could have gotten rid of the drugs and then called the police. Or they don't have the drugs now. They could tell people now what happened. I mean, like, you know what I mean? It's just weird.
A man named Corey Hammersley, this is not the Corey that she was with. He was an inmate at Indiana State Prison. He used to be a star student and athlete at IU, and he got into drugs. A year after her disappearance, he had a meltdown while on drugs. He went outside naked in only a cowboy hat, and he went outside shooting into a house and shooting at police. I've seen this video. It's kind of funny. It is sad, but it's funny. So an inmate at the state prison was playing cards with him, and Lauren's photo came up on the TV. Apparently, they had a TV in the prison, and this inmate said He was an anonymous inmate. He said that Corey said, "Man, I knew the guys that did that." And this was his version of what Corey told him. He said that they were drinking and doing ecstasy and she overdosed. And it scared them so much they didn't know what to do with her, so they took her to the Ohio River and disposed of her. And the police tried to get Hammersley to talk, and he said that even if he knew anything, he wouldn't tell the police because he doesn't want to be associated with the case. And the investigators do think that this is a really likely theory because of how simple it is, but I guess Lindsay thinks otherwise.
No, okay, so if they dumped her in the river, what river?
The Ohio River.
Is that like a big body of water?
Yeah, but it's 3 hours away from campus.
What? They're not going to drive 3 hours with a dead body and dump it there. I don't buy it. I really don't. I will tell you this. If there is no video of her where there should be video of her, like there are cameras but she's not on them, then yes, I will buy that theory. But I think it's more likely that they have video of her and they're just not releasing it.
Going into that, there is another theory where Lauren had been purchasing her illegal drugs from a motorcycle gang called the Sons of Silence. And apparently this motorcycle gang is like super hardcore. There's a documentary on the History Channel that described them as so brutal as to be a new kind of mafia. And they think that maybe she could have been killed for the debt that she owed.
What?
Bo Dean, well, his name was Robert Strange, but he went by Bo Dean.
That's a better name.
One of his relatives told police that he shot Lauren and buried her on his farmland property. And this is really unlikely, in my opinion, and investigators agree with that it's really unlikely. If you're a 20-year-old college student, you're not going to be purchasing your drugs from an illegal motorcycle gang that's as brutal as the mafia. You're going to go to the kid down the hall.
Right, right. And she would never owe money. Like, there wouldn't be drug debts. Like, she would just use her parents' money. Like, what?
So Lauren's case is also connected to a girl named Rachel Feige. And this is a pretty similar story if she did overdose, but this story isn't a crime, but I do want to tell a little bit of it anyway because I think it's super important. Rachel went to IU. She was a freshman in 2013, and she went to an off-campus party during Welcome Week and fell down a flight of stairs leading to the basement, and she hit her head. There were no signs of physical injury, and no one thought that she was hurt, so she laid down, and the next morning at 7 a.m., someone noticed that she wasn't breathing, so they called 911. The EMS were able to get a pulse back, but she was on a ventilator by the time she got to the hospital. She had been in cardiac arrest 4 times that morning, and she died in the hospital. And her mom started Rachel's First Week, which is a program dedicated to help teens as they transition into adulthood to look out for each other at these parties. And we will link to this in our episode notes because I think it is a really cool program.
And so necessary because this happens all the time.
It does, because a lot of college students think that if someone gets hurt while they're drunk or on drugs that they're going to get in trouble. But a lot of campuses have implemented what they call amnesty laws, where if you think that your friend is overdosing or has alcohol poisoning,
like if anybody gets hurt, you will not get in trouble.
Right, you won't get in trouble.
If you call for help.
Right. So I think that's really great that campuses are doing that, but I do know that a lot of students don't really utilize that because they think that maybe their friend isn't sick enough.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to so many frat parties where there's somebody like drunk and passed out puking, and I just walk right over them and like, haha.
Right.
But yes, it's amazing that they have this new amnesty, law in place, but there are more reasons than just worrying that they're going to get in trouble that people don't call. It's because lots of reasons. You're young, you're in college, you don't realize the severity of a situation, but it's not anybody's fault. It's not like malicious, but it's a good thing they have this because that might encourage more people to call for help. So why don't we talk about the random abduction theory?
Okay, so there are a couple cases connected to Lauren's case, and also a couple killers connected to her case. The first one that I'll talk about is the first one that happened to a student at Indiana University in 2000. She disappeared. Her name was Jill Berman. Her body was found in March of 2003, 3 years later, by hunters in a wooded roadside area east of Bloomington. She had a shotgun wound to the back of her head, and John...
She'd gone for a bike ride, right?
Yes.
And she just disappeared during her bike ride?
Right. There's a lot more to this story. They found her bike a couple days after, but didn't find her body until 3 years later. In 2006, John Myers was arrested for her abduction and murder. And this case specifically isn't connected to Lauren's case. Like, obviously, John Myers couldn't have done this to Lauren because he was in prison, but it is similar, and it shows how it's not that uncommon that students at IU go missing. Another girl who was 22, she was found dead in 2015. Her name was Hannah Wilson. She also went to IU. She was found hours after she was reported missing in a wooded area of Plum Creek. Investigators believe that she was probably beaten with a flashlight after she was out drinking with her friends.
At Kilroy's bar?
Yes, at Kilroy's. And
so the same bar that Lauren Spierer was last seen at, this girl, Hannah Wilson, was also last seen at.
The man responsible for this was named Daniel Messel. The way that they found him is that he left his cell phone lying near her body. Hannah's hair, blood, and DNA were found in his SUV. And remember, this is in 2015, so 4 years after Lauren went missing. And Hannah's mom thinks that Daniel Messel could be responsible for Lauren's disappearance. And the prosecutor on the case, his name is Ted Adams, he says that he's a simple prosecuting attorney with no inside information on Lauren's case, so this is just his opinion. But he says that Daniel's MO was random, beautiful, promising young co-ed women. And there were 5 women harassed by Daniel Messel that's reported. Daniel Messel was sentenced to 80 years for the murder of Hannah Wilson. And Lauren Spierer was in the what they call the danger zone of where Daniel would commit his crimes. She was drunk, she was alone. Her disappearance and vulnerability is consistent with the danger zone of Daniel Messel. And we will link in our episode notes to a website with his timeline.
Yeah, and something else that's really interesting about Daniel Messel is, remember we said there was a witness who saw Lauren hit her head and that Corey threw her over his shoulder and carried her?
Yeah.
So that witness is a girl who's a manager at a bar called Yogi's. And she knew Daniel Messer. And it's just kind of strange that Daniel Messer knows Messel, whatever. Is it Messel or Messer?
Messel. Daniel Messel.
Messel. 49 years old. Messer. What is happening?
This website says both Messel and Messer, but when I click on it, it says, oops, can't be found.
So we don't know if it's Daniel Messel or Messer. It's stated both ways. But this guy knew the girl who was the witness in Lauren Spierer's case, which is an interesting connection. And something else that's really weird about this Daniel Messel guy is that he was a mushroom gleaner. Do you know what a gleaner is, Lauren?
No.
Okay, so a gleaner is somebody who goes and hunts in the woods for things that grow in the wild, like mushrooms. And they're very rare, and it's only a small time for the season where they go in the woods and they hunt for these mushrooms, and then they go and sell them. And I don't know why he does it. I mean, for money, I guess he did it. But anyway, because he is known as a mushroom gleaner, people think that he knows the woods very well. And so there's like a whole huge rabbit hole on Web Sleuths as to where Lauren's body could be buried, because it could be buried near one of these mushroom gleaning grounds. Another interesting thing is that guess who found Jill Berman's body? Mushroom gleaners. Yeah. So like Daniel Messer is not the only mushroom gleaner. Like, it's an actual thing. If you Google gleaning or mushroom gleaning or whatever, I went down a whole huge, like, it's a thing. Okay. It's a thing. And they are the ones that found Jill Berman's body. So, I mean, there is a big theory that Daniel Messel, because Lauren disappeared from Kilroy's and so did Hannah, that they're connected, and that Daniel, got away with Lauren's murder and just got sloppy when he did Hannah's. So really there's 2 main theories in this case. It's either her friends had something to do with it, and it was like an accident and they're covering it up, or it was a random serial killer like Daniel Messel or Israel Keys. You want to talk about Israel Keys, Lo?
Yeah, so Israel Keys, if you haven't heard of him, I won't go into too much detail about him because we will be doing an episode on him eventually, so you can find out more there. But he was a serial killer who started in 1996, and what made him so hard to catch was that he did not have a victim profile. So it made it really hard to know that it was a serial killer because everyone that was a victim of Israel Keys was like a different type of person. Like it didn't matter if they were old, young, man, woman, whatever. So Israel Keys was in Indiana when Lauren disappeared, but we know from toll roads that he was on the opposite side of the state. So it's not impossible, but it's also not likely that he had something to do with Lauren's disappearance. But we will link his timeline in the episode notes.
Yes. And the last theory is that it was an accident, that there was a construction site right across the street from her friend's apartment, Jay's apartment, that she was leaving. It was Jay, right? That she was last leaving?
Yes.
So directly across the street from his apartment was an open construction site. So it is possible that she was stumbling around because she had hit her head and she was wasted and on drugs and she fell like into some kind of like pit or, cement, or, I mean, it's possible that it was just an accident and nobody else was involved.
I feel like since she was reported missing so soon, though, that
they would have found her.
Right. But we do know that one theory that isn't really common, like people don't think that she just walked away from her life.
Oh, yeah. No, it's not like she ran away and
right
and is alive and well and just doesn't want to be with her family. No, definitely not.
Right.
Definitely not that.
I mean, it's not, if it was a random abduction, there's nothing to say that it was like a random abduction and murder. I mean, it's not impossible that she's like alive and out there, but she's definitely not alive and well, if that makes sense.
You mean like she could be alive and being held in somebody's basement?
Right.
Yes, that is possible. Her parents for sure think that she's dead, but and they just want her body to be returned. It's really sad when you read updates from her family, begging people. She's like, you are out there somewhere. Somebody knows something, and I don't know how you can sleep, at night knowing what you know. Just, we don't even care what happened right now. We just want to know where she is so we can bring her home and bury her. It's just so sad. It's terrible.
Yeah, so in 2013, 2 years after she disappeared, her parents, Rob and Charlene, filed a lawsuit against the three men that were with her, Jay Rosenbaum, Mike Beth, and Corey Rossman. Their attorney, Rob and Charlene's attorney, said that they didn't want to file a case, but they were nearing a litigation deadline. So the claim that was made was that the men in question were aware that Lauren was intoxicated to a point in which she was unable to care for herself, and they didn't practice due diligence in making sure that she got home. They say that their daughter's status is the result of the defendant's negligence, which included having supplied the underage Lauren with drugs and alcohol. The case was moved to federal court because the defendants didn't live in Indiana anymore at the time of the lawsuit, but the case was thrown out by the judge because they couldn't prove that Jason or Corey or Mike had a duty to care for her. So that's just a little summary, but if you want to read more on it, you can, and we'll post a link of the case in our episode notes. You can find it under Spierer v. Rossman. Her parents don't believe that it was random. Like we said, they think that the people who were with her that night have critical information. Her parents didn't attend Lauren's graduation, but the college did say her name to try to renew the search by reminding people. Her parents, like we said, no longer believe that she's alive. They are searching for her body at this point because they want to give her a proper burial.
Yes, and there is an official Lauren Spierer Facebook group. It's called Official Lauren Spierer Updates from Her Family. You can message them there. Lauren would be 30 years old today. Our hearts go out to her family. We hope that Lauren gets justice someday. We hope that she is found and brought home. And we would love to hear what you guys think. Please leave us a comment on our Instagram account at Murderlicious Podcast. Please send us an email to murderliciouspodcast@gmail.com. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode, and we'll see you next week.